Please welcome rookie speaker Marguerite Manelski. Today she'll be presenting her session, User Acceptance Testing. What is it? And when is it enough? Please stick around after Marguerite's session for a live Q&A.
DynamicsCon Virtual. My name is Marguerite Manelski, and I am an application consultant with Innovia Consulting. I have been with Innovia for about 4 years and spent about 12 years on the user side. We are going to be discussing user acceptance testing. What is it, and when do you know if it's enough? Within this conversation, I first want to take the opportunity to thank DynamicsCon for the opportunity to present this material. This is one of those subjects that is often not talked about enough, but it is one of the most crucial parts of any project that you will run into within Business Central, or really any product that you're going live with. So, recent studies have found that 14% of all software projects are deemed successful and 19% are deemed complete failures. So what about the remaining 65%? Well, those are often projects that are considered just done. These are the types of projects that maybe they're working as expected, maybe they're not, but we're just happy to have them off of our plate and we don't want to deal with it anymore. So we're just going to tolerate whatever is available. This often is something that, comes down to, more often than not, user acceptance testing. And as you see in the little picture that I have presented, we have a very beautiful sidewalk. It leads to another sidewalk that takes us through a walk in a park. But what do we see in the middle? We see someone started and multiple people have followed through with shortcuts. Well, this is oftentimes what you'll see within user acceptance testing and throughout projects. This means that people will find ways to shortcut, and thus it actually affects the integrity of the project. So we really need to make sure that we have outlined how do we keep that from happening. We know it's going to happen, but let's minimize it. So what we have is we have two types of testing, and these often are considered interchangeable within most people's minds. But in reality, they're not. As you'll see, user testing is an opportunity where people just look at a process and they just go, yep, that worked, and they sign off on it. That doesn't mean that it's actually the process we're trying to accomplish. User acceptance testing means that they are taking ownership. They are validating that every part of that process is correct. So how do we look at that? Do we sit there and say, yeah, I did it, I don't, it didn't work, it passed? Well, let's use an example of a sales order. We can post a sales order from the sales order. We click on document, we click on the post button at the top and we click ship or ship an invoice and we posted the sales order. It passed, but did it really pass? What if we're implementing an ISV? What if we're using warehousing? Maybe we have process changes in how that order needs to flow through the process. So those examples we outline within user acceptance testing. We say, hey, I need to create the sales order. I need to release the sales order. I need to create documents such as warehouse documents, shipping documents, things like that. This is something that we really have to push on because ultimately these are the things that will cause us to fail throughout our project. So, we talk about it, UAT, and now we say, okay, so we have to do it. But why is it important? Well, some very important things. The first one is budget. Anyone who's involved in a project does not really want to go over a budget. If we delay our testing, we don't test correctly, chances are we're probably going to increase the budget, if not exceed the budget. And nobody wants to have that conversation. So, we look at our system and say, to a little user who is just posting a sales order, they don't see that. But we as the people that are driving the UAT have to see that. Our deliverables. Every project has a deliverable. It doesn't matter if it's just the Amazon package showing up at your door or if it's just the ISV that's getting put in there. We have a deliverable. Go live is that. That is our deliverable. Did we create any process changes? Those are deliverables. We have to make sure that through our UAT process, we implement the changes that are expected. We implement and go live. Not only do we go live, but we really need to go live on time. What ends up happening? We push out go live. People quit. We hire new people. All these things start coming into play, and our deliverables become harder and harder to reach. And the one that stands out the most to me is user buy-in. If my users are not accepting what we're implementing, my likelihood is it's probably not going to turn out to be very well. So what I always tell people is user buy-in within UAT has got to be a prime focus. While it's okay to tell your associates that, hey, this is your job and you just need to do your job. That's perfectly fine. We understand that that's their job. But what we need to have them do is own that process, own that job. Because if you're a warehouse person, do you really want to train somebody every 2 weeks? I don't. And nor did I ever want to when I was on the user side. So it's just a simple thing of, if I am the person that's owning the process, I need to encourage my users. Let's go ahead. Let's own it. Let's explain why you own it and show them that there's pride that needs to take place. So the question becomes, why does UAT ultimately fail? Well, there's some pretty good reasons, and there's always a good explanation behind it. Did we not have a good test plan? Everybody thinks they have a great test plan, but do we really have one? We can say, hey, I got 50 items on a checklist. But when we look at that, should that really be broken out more into maybe 200 or 300? And it sounds excessive, but in a few moments, we'll kind of talk about it, and I'll explain why it's important to have it really broken out. Do we have the correct users completing UAT? Do I have a user who has the business understanding of what the final outcome needs to be? Oftentimes, we just pick a person because they're the one that's going to do the job the fastest. Doesn't mean that they have the most buy-in and that they want to accomplish the process. Oftentimes, we find that with people when we're changing processes, we tend to lean on the one that's just going to go, okay, that's what you want me to do. I'll do it. But that's not necessarily the best person. We need to look at the person that's going to own it, and also the person that's going to raise their hand and really ask questions. Am I doing this right? Is this the best way to do it? Because that's the only way we're going to grow as individuals and as a business. Our UAT environment, does it have good testing scenarios? Oftentimes we see users will have a database that's 2, 3, 4 years old. And they say, it's okay, just go ahead and put that process in there. We'll figure it out. Well, that's fine. But is it a real representation of what your business is? It's not. So really, we have to make sure that we have a database that is current, that truly makes sense to what we're doing in our day-to-day business. Our communication. Are we having the best communication? Do we have users that aren't willing to speak up because they don't feel heard? Are we willing to advise when there's a concern? These are the people we really, really need to be a part of our UAT. Again, they don't always have to know every single part of the business, but what they need to know is the part that they're going to own. If you're in the shipping department and you're just a person that says, hey, I'm just here to put parts in a box and put a label on it, and out the door it goes, they may not be the best person because they're not willing to raise their hand and say, hey guys, I'm finding that it's taking 15 seconds for this label to print out. Is there any way to do this? Or the label prints out and it's not so clear. I'm concerned that it's going to get lost in UPS. Those are all things that we have to make sure that we communicate to our staff be willing to communicate back to us that we're here to hear them. We're going to take their concerns and we're going to validate them, and then we're going to see where we can improve if we can improve. And the other piece is that we have users that are just not willing to adapt to change. This is the user that's just like, yep, I'm good. It passed. They don't care. And it's not that they don't care, but they don't have the full long-term perspective of the business in their mind. They're just a person who comes in, they do their job, and they go home. And those users are great, but they're not the best people to really be doing UAT. And what the other piece that we have is, it kind of goes along with all of this, is my picture, the round to it. You know, we all have said it. I'll get round to it. I'll get round to it. And what happens? We get busy. Our life changes. Or we just forget about it. And then next thing we know, we're further and further down the road and users can't, complete their processes. If I take a salesperson who is supposed to enter sales orders and they do I'll get around to it. What happens? They don't enter a sales order. Your warehouse can't ship. Your invoicing can't take place. Your quality department can't issue returns. All these processes potentially would need to be tested. But because one person said, I'll get round to it, it holds up everyone else. And that's just not good UAT. So how do we make sure that users are testing? So the first thing is that we, as the project guides, we have to be the warriors in this. We have to be the people that are going to be the nice guy, and we have to be the not so nice guy. So oftentimes what I encourage people to do is let's schedule. Let's schedule some time. We can do this in any of our products. We have all these great tools. We have Outlook, we have Teams, we have, all these other pieces where you can schedule meetings. And I encourage you to do that. And it doesn't mean that somebody has to sit there, you're not sitting on the phone with them and babysitting them and saying, oh, well, why did you take 5 minutes to complete something that should have took 2? No, but what we're doing is we're encouraging them and we're holding them accountable. That during this block of time, you're going to test what you need to test and get done what you can. And I'm going to make sure that I am available to you during that time. Because one of the other things is you have users that will test, especially newer systems. Permissions are a great example. They test and they get a permission error and they come to you to adjust their permissions and you're in the middle of a meeting and you just can't help them at that moment. So they just go, okay, I'm just not going to test right now because they're not available. I can't get any further. So now we've lost the momentum within the testing. But if we're all available during that, it gives us a great opportunity. The other thing is, by using these platforms, you actually are giving yourself the opportunity, let's record the sessions. They're all simply for internal use, but what it does is it gives you something to reference back to. Hey, Sarah was my tester for the purchasing department, and she's about to go have a baby. She's going to be unreachable for the next 6 months. And that gives us an opportunity that we can go back and as other users, if she passes something and another user says it fails, hey, let's go look at Sarah's recording and let's see what was she doing different than you of why you guys got different results. The other cases are that we have to create sign-off sheets. Now, these sign-off sheets are twofold. They're so that we can record all of our processes and ensure that they're done. And 2, it's never meant to be a slap on the hand for anybody. So a lot of users tend to get a little weird with sign-off sheets because they feel that it's something that you're trying to get them in trouble for. No, as I said, if Sarah passes it, but then, Aaron goes to do it and Aaron can't pass it, we need to know. Let's go back to Sarah. We know who the person was that did the testing. Let's look at the scenario that they tested. Let's look at it because we can't just test one scenario. As you see, I call out, we have to test multiple scenarios. So we have to look at all of these opportunities as great opportunities for that, to grow and improve our processes, by completing test scenarios. So how do we build a UAT sign-off list? We have to first determine what defines a successful implementation. That's going to decide our UAT sign-off list. So we have to work together as a team to build that out. So this idea may be, what is successful? That may come from your owners. That may just come from your C-suite. You could be the person, just as the project lead, you're the person that determines if it's successful, or it could even be the end users. If you're implementing a process within your warehouse may be one of the key pieces that determines, is it successful? Once you've gone live, are they happy? Does it feel like it's working? Is it improving their processes? So all of those things have to be taken into consideration to determine what makes a successful implementation. We have to outline our processes that need to be tested and reviewed. So we encourage our users to daily test, continue building out test scenarios. There's nothing more frustrating than a warehouse person who gets handed a UAT checklist that was written by a sales manager. Sales manager's not out there. He's not living the life. He doesn't know what they deal with. So the people that are going to own the processes, let them help build the scenarios. While they can go through and they can, push it back to other people, give them some freedom to write the scenarios. This goes back to part of that buy-in. When the users feel that they're being heard, they're a lot more willing to take this on. Then we have our key users. So we have to have two different kinds. We have a key user who owns the process. This often tends to be more of like the manager of the department. A warehouse manager will own some warehouse processes. Maybe the shipping manager owns just the shipping. And then you have your key users. One thing that I see all too often is your key user is not always your manager or your supervisor. These key users are the users that are literally doing it day to day. So while our owners are great assets, our biggest asset are our testing users, because they're living and breathing it every single day. And then again, we push on that assigned times. So when you look at something like you're re-implementing Business Central, you sit there and say, okay, my sales team tends to have more availability throughout the day. They may not have, quote, busy times, but my warehouse probably does. So do I want to just look at them and say, hey guys, at 3 o'clock, I need you to start testing? Probably not a good opportunity for your warehouse to test. Oftentimes warehouses tend to get a little bit busier in the afternoon as they're trying to make sure that they get as much stuff out the door as possible. So we need to assign our warehouse to be testing early in the morning, maybe first thing. So that pushes back and we look at our sales team. I need you guys entering sales orders throughout the day, whatever it is. And just say, I need these orders entered and I need them entered before you go home for the day because my warehouse cannot test until that is completed. So it's this back and forth of holding everybody accountable. So with that being said, how do we hold people accountable? So I have provided 3 separate scenarios. The first one we're going to see, this is my favorite, and it just makes my head spin. You'll see the very first line, review all tabs, fields, columns, fact boxes to ensure pertinent information is available. Well, Bob is the owner and Bob is the user who tested and he passed it. But what does it mean? Where am I looking? What tabs am I on? What page am I on? If I'm running in multiple companies, we're all on the same system, but we have multiple companies. Well, maybe company A, you need these tabs, and on company B, you need these tabs. So it makes it very hard to know, did it really pass? Then we look down at the second line and we see Bob's the owner, and he is looking to Jim to do the testing. Review item fact box. Jim says he passed it, but Jim has gone above and beyond and he's put some notes. He tested with a specific item. So that gives us something. If something comes up down the road, we know which item to go back and look at. Same thing, cross-reference. Jim has stated that he tested with a specific item, it failed. He tested with a second item, it failed. So now we have some opportunities to look back and go see what is failing. Now, Jim probably could have put some additional notes in here, but that's where there's a little freedom. How detailed do you want the notes to be? Or do you just care that they've referenced what they were looking at? Each person looks at this a little bit different, simply because that testing or notes column can really get kind of ugly if they put too many notes. So we want to keep it simple, but we want to do it in a way that we get all the information that we need. And as you continue down, we'll go down to the second grouping, and we see Sarah. And we're going to see Sarah is the owner of the process, and we see some other people tested, and they just go pass, 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 pass. Okay, they've given us their opportunities, their examples, and we can go, it's a sales. They probably were able to pass them without some issues, especially on a first run. Sorry about that. So she's marked them all as passed, and we can see them notated. Then in our third sample, we see some additional information. And this is where it really starts getting interesting, because Bill is the owner of many of these processes, but you see that there's some, other users, Bill and Kevin and Emily and them, that are ultimately doing the processes, and they're determining if they pass or fail. And you'll see that on Create Warehouse Pick, not only did they tell us what pick they did, because what happens if we go through this process and the pick gets posted, we lost it. But what Bill did was Bill said, I tested with this sales order and this sales shipment. So it gives us a little bit, we've got some more detail without getting a lot of detail. So the important thing again is that we have our owner. So in the last example, we have Bill. Bill is our warehouse manager. So Bill may complete some of these processes, but Bill gets busy. So he looks to Kevin and says, hey, Kevin, I create the paperwork, but you're really the person that does the shipping. Can you go and can you test this? So Kevin goes and he's able to go and say, yep, I can ship this and I can do this. But some processes fail. So you'll see things on here that ship LTL shipment, ship a UPS order. These are important to test all independently, because oftentimes there are setups that are unique to each of those carriers that we also need to test those. So when you're building out your UAT list, keep that in mind. It's important, not only do we call out UPS, but what services do we use? Do we use ground? Do we use next day air? Do we use Saturday delivery? Do we do internationals? Do we get all of our international paperwork? All of these pieces should really be looked at and signed off separately. So it's important to, again, make this list detailed. It may seem like it's a lot when somebody looks at the numbers, but when it comes to really pushing forward and knowing where there's an issue and what passes, what fails, it's going to help us stay on track. We're going to hit that go live date. We're going to stay closer to our budget. All those things start coming into play. So with that said, what are some of our common UAT issues? Oh, these are my favorites. So printers. Printers, I don't care. It's one of those things that forever seems to go kind of crazy. So always test the actual printing of the document, because users tend to do print preview. And while the report previews, it doesn't actually go out to the printer. User accounts that have never been activated. Oh, that's another one, especially within Business Central. Oftentimes, we're hesitant to put in all of our users at the very beginning of a project simply because of the licensing that we're paying. So, we may put in 5 or 6 to get the ball rolling, and then as we get closer to go live, we start putting in more and more of those users. But what happens when the very first day comes and users can't access the system? Kind of makes for a pretty rough Monday. and it slows down your process. And the moment that something like that happens, everybody starts getting, panic, like, oh my goodness, especially if it's happening to more than one user. So always test all users. Have them go through, once you have your key user complete the testing, have your users process. If you have a shipping manager, they've signed off on the processes. Their key user has signed off on the testing of those processes. Once that's completed, make sure that all of the other shipping people can get in and process at least one transaction. Even if it's a basic transaction, at least so that we know that they can start moving. Workstations where software was not installed. We see this more often with more of the on-prem and older versions, but within Business Central, there's some opportunities that some of the ISVs also require these things. So it's important to, again, have your users open the system, have them check, make sure that they can do all their stuff, because if we are missing software, we need to get it installed. If you're working with an older version, what if you have a new computer? You've changed some stuff. What's the first thing that happens? We're running the wrong bit version, and then the users can't get in. While that goes away within Business Central, again, ISVs may have those kinds of situations. Key users were the only ones who completed the end-to-end testing. So it's the same thing like I was mentioning earlier. We need to make sure that all users ultimately have gotten in. We need to make sure that they have the right permissions. Maybe they're not sure how to complete the task because they weren't trained. And those are very scary days, because as the project lead or the person overseeing UAT, we start getting stressed. Our users are stressed, which now stresses us out even more. And the whole point of all of this is to make it less stress. Then we have those famous, we didn't test all of our processes. Custom scenarios, one-off scenarios. We didn't think about them. So it's important to really build that UAT list. And I encourage people, you start that UAT list a little bit on the earlier side, so that the moment you decide we're going to start making changes, we're going to do a re-implementation, an upgrade, whatever it is, what are some of these one-offs? Have people start building that list. If you have, a team come on and they're going through and they're just doing, some basic on-site understanding, and they go back and they write some paperwork, the moment you start reviewing that paperwork, start recording those processes. What's the worst thing that happens? You don't do your project and you don't use them. Yeah, it's kind of a sucky situation, but it's a lot easier to say, hey, I got that document I wrote up and we're not using it, than to sit there on day of go live and go, oh, we've never even thought of that one and we had a year to think about it. It's a kind of rough day. And then reports. So it's important to test all reports. Every report you can think of, test those. Because oftentimes people, they don't think about that. Statistics reports are things that maybe you only run once or twice a year. So it's important that you test those the moment you think about them. Then we have our examples of failed implementations. So this is not unique to our business, and it will never be unique to our business. And hopefully, if we do have a failed implementation, which our goal is not to, but if we have one that tends to be described as a failure, it doesn't fall within this range. I mean, look at these. Nike lost over $100 million because they didn't train their staff. Avon, 125, because guess what? They didn't train their staff. And Hershey, unprocessed orders of $100 million. Again, inadequate training. So all of these, when you look at these numbers, I mean, I'll be honest, when I saw these and I saw what companies they were associated with, I almost fell over, because I could not imagine having to sit in front of anybody and try to explain that kind of loss. I don't want to explain a $20 loss, let alone millions of dollars. And I'm guessing you guys probably don't want to either. So it's really important to remember, one, we're not alone in this. But do we ever want our name to be associated with a failed implementation? whether it's in our company, outside of our company. We don't want to be, looked at that. We're humans. We want people to look at us and say, you did a great job. So we have to just continue to push forward. So with that, how do we know if UAT was successful? So one of the first things that I tell everybody is, did our users buy in? When we go live, are our users comfortable with the processes? If they are comfortable with the processes, the likelihood is that we have a greater chance of success. So it's very, very important that the users say, yes, it may have been a struggle and a headache to get here, but we're here. And it may not happen on day one. Everybody expects day one to be like the make or break it. It's not. What we do is we encourage you look at what your users feel on the day of go live, no matter how big or small the process, and then come back to them in 4 to 6 weeks. How is it going now? Because at the end of the day, that's the true tell. Because they're going to then say, you know what, guys? I don't know who tested this, but it was not good because this is just bad. But then there's going to be times that users are going to say, hey, you know what? This is perfect. We went live and it was almost everything we asked for. Then we have our go live without issue. So again, we know there's going to be hiccups. That's just the way of the world. So the question is, how fast can we recover from that hiccup? That helps tell how well you did during UAT. What was the hiccup? Is it a matter of the hiccup being the printer broke on the day of go live? That's something we couldn't prepare for. We couldn't test for. But are all of our reports printing? Are all of our orders going out the door? Is everybody kind of sitting back and relaxing? I've been part of go lives on the user side where, it's important to make sure that the team's there, because if you don't have your support team, whether internal or external, it can be kind of ugly, no matter good or bad. So it's important to make sure that, you question, did we have hiccups? What were our hiccups? Write them down. Because in 6 weeks, when we come back and we have a conversation with C-suite or our users or whoever we want to have a conversation with, we're going to reference that. These were our issues. Yep, we were able to get it resolved relatively quickly, and that helps us determine how good that UAT was. And the most important one really becomes management's feedback on the final result. So everyone says, yep, management, oftentimes owners and C-suite, they don't care. Well, they do, because at the end of the day, they probably wrote the check to complete whatever the process was, no matter if it was $100 or $1 million. Somebody wrote the check and they want to know that it was good. But those C-suite and owners are often, just that. They just go, okay, I'm paying the bills. I'm not down there with the team. So I don't know if it was good. I know we're live. But what we want is everybody giving feedback. However that structure is determined within your company, that's something that's a business perspective. Some owners don't want to have conversations. Maybe they're not in a position to have conversations. Other companies are a little bit smaller and the owners want to hear people. I came from a company that was on the smaller side, and my president and my owners love to hear especially positive feedback. But one of the important parts is whether you're on the implementation team, you're the users, you're the C-suite, be honest. No matter what, be honest. Was your project successful? Do you guys feel that you tested properly? Because at the end of the day, no matter what, there's probably something that could have been tested a little bit better. But it's important to be honest about that, because that's the only way the next one won't be so crazy. So it's just important to continue that conversation. So with that being said, I wanted to thank all of you, and I wanted to again thank DynamicsCon for giving us the opportunity to present on user acceptance testing. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat if you already haven't. And with that, I say thank you.